I'm really very excited about our hearing today because I think we are about setting California on a new course, recognizing that 96% of the people in our state prisons will be coming back to our communities, and that recidivism can be reduced by 43% if there is education for specific inmates because they do better when they get out. And if they have some higher education, recidivism is actually reduced by about 51%. Think about the money to be saved, the lives to be saved, the victims not to be victimized, and the stability of our communities that we can create if we can bring this to scale. It's a huge challenge, and we have some really excellent opportunities right now to move ahead in that great effort. I really appreciate our panelists who are here today. We have Doug Wood from the Ford Foundation, which is offering an opportunity for California to perhaps join with the 3 other states, Michigan, North Carolina, and New Jersey, in putting some of these new best practices in place. We have Robert Bozick from the RAND Corporation, which did a seminal study nationwide of education in prison and what it can do to encourage and increase rehabilitation. And then Debbie Mukamal and Rebecca Silbert will talk about their study, which has just been released. It's called Degrees of Freedom, Expanding College Opportunity for Currently and Formerly Incarcerated Californians. I urge you to read it. It is full of very accessible and concrete information about what's going on in this state at this period of time. So after that, we will also have a panel of hearing from CDCR and from our community college chancellor's office, who have been putting together a memorandum of understanding to implement SB 3191, but more importantly, to increase the opportunities for in-person higher education that can be transferable to community colleges and four-year colleges on the outside. They've been doing really wonderful collaboration together, and we're looking forward to hearing from them. So I'm pleased to have other members of the committee here, and I wondered if any other members of the committee had remarks that they wanted to make before we begin. No? No? Senator Leno.
Very briefly, I just want to thank you for convening this, because no one has led the charge more valiantly and consistently than you, Senator Hancock. We're standing on the shoulders of some greats such as Senator John Vasconcellos, who of course worked on this issue among so many others in terms of reform in our prison system for decades. And as you have pointed out, 9 out of 10 of our inmates are coming out. So the question is not whether we want them to come out, they are coming out. And how do we want them to come out? Of course, it would only make sense that they have some opportunity to succeed in their parole and to succeed in their future life. I just had the opportunity to spend a couple hours with our good friend Mimi Silbert of Delancey Street Foundation just last Friday, and she continues to inspire and invigorate and is full of ideas. And of course, she's had so much success in her professional career in turning lives around. So it's not as if we don't know what to do. It's really a matter of whether we have the political will. And our good fortune is to have Director Tidwell at the helm right now. I've seen her at any number of graduation ceremonies, at San Quentin for many of the very successful volunteer-led programs that they have there. And so there is every opportunity for us to seize the hour and to really make some changes and find some big success at this time. So glad to be here.
Thank you. Any other members?
I'm tickled that we're doing this today, and I'm expecting to see good numbers, and I'm looking forward to great outcomes. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Let's begin. Would the first panel come forward, please? And I think we're going to reverse the order that's on your agenda and begin with Dr. Wood, Program Officer at the Ford Foundation, continue with Robert Bozick from RAND, and then hear from Rebecca Silbert and Debbie Mukama. Welcome to the committee.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, honorable members of the Senate Committee on Public Safety, staff members, and citizens of the great state of California. I want to thank the Honorable Chair for her gracious invitation to be part of this important hearing this morning, and my colleagues and I look forward to a thoughtful, fruitful, imaginative discussion. We are truly honored to be here. For the record, my name is Dr. Douglas E. Wood, and I am a program officer and acting director of the Ford Foundation's Global Higher Education for Social Justice Initiative. The goal of our work is to foster policy and institutional reforms that improve disadvantaged people's access to and success in high-quality post-secondary and tertiary education. Our work in higher education spans the globe: the United States, Colombia, Peru, Chile, Brazil, Southern Africa, Egypt, and the People's Republic of China. In the United States, we focus on supporting first-generation college students to receive a high-quality post-secondary credential or degree with a particular focus on immigrants, veterans, the incarcerated, and the formerly incarcerated. It is the latter population that brings me here today. 4 years ago, when we were developing our new U.S. strategy, we made the decision to refocus our higher education work back to our roots as a foundation. The focus of our strategy is not new, only reimagined. One only has to read the important memos and writings of Christopher Edley Sr., the first African-American program officer at the Ford Foundation, to understand that the challenges we faced in the late 1960s are all too familiar and even exacerbated today as in our nation's criminal justice system. As part of an important strand in our higher education for social justice work, 3 years ago, we launched the Pathways from Prison to Post-Secondary Education project, as Chairman Hancock mentioned. This is a 5-year national initiative to increase educational attainment and employment opportunities for incarcerated and formerly incarcerated individuals by supporting an expansion of educational opportunities in prison, seamless entry into higher education post-incarceration, and reentry services that promote individual success in the community. This effort involves partnerships between colleges, prisons, and parole officials, and community and business leaders in New Jersey, Michigan, and North Carolina to make access to post-secondary education in prison and immediately after a reality. The aim of Pathways, which is a public-private partnership between the states and 5 leading national foundations, Ford, Gates, the Sunshine Lady, which of course is Doris Buffett's foundation, Warren's sister, Open Society, and Kellogg, is to transform lives as well as build stronger families and ultimately to renew communities. Key features of the project include the Vera Institute of Justice, acting as a national intermediary, provides technical assistance and supports a cross-site learning community in prison, face-to-face, and post-release post-secondary education, is provided by accredited local colleges and universities. Developmental GED, vocational, and college readiness courses and academic support services are provided for students Alignment of courses, degrees, and certification programs are aligned with regional labor market needs with partnerships with local employers. Transfer of college credits from prison to colleges in the community. Mentoring, tutoring, and reentry support services. Parole supervision practices that support pursuit of post-secondary educational attainment. A cost-benefit analysis conducted by VERA's cost-benefit analysis unit. And finally, and very importantly, a third-party evaluation provided by the RAND Corporation with a focus on implementation, meaning replicability and scale, outcomes, meaning post-secondary enrollment and persistence, credential attainment, employment, and impact, meaning recidivism reduction. But I want to emphasize, however, that we consider impact as being broader than reducing recidivism alone. Over a year and a half ago, I was here visiting students at the Prison University Project at San Quentin, one of the many high-quality programs the Ford Foundation funds across the country, and found out that it was the only in-person program that had been restarted after the in-person courses in California's prisons had dropped dramatically in the 1990s. I heard students talk about the lack of quality of correspondence courses, the rigor of the Prison University Project in comparison, and why several had put in for a transfer request to San Quentin, in order to have the opportunity to have a high-quality post-secondary education. I'd heard similar stories from students enrolled in the Hudson Link program, in Sing Sing Correctional in New York State, which we also fund. It was there, within the walls of San Quentin, and in a PUP classroom, that I decided it was important for the Ford Foundation to work with partners in California to support the development of high-quality programs for those who are incarcerated and formerly incarcerated. As you know, partners in this public-private initiative, which we are calling Renewing Communities, are the Warren Institute at UC Berkeley Law, the Stanford Criminal Justice Center, and the Vera Institute for Justice, to design a program based on best practices and available resources in California, to build public and political will to support the initiative's goals, to pilot high-quality and replicable post-secondary programs in state prisons, local jails, and the communities through an RFP process, and develop the program and policy infrastructure and partnerships with the state, other national, California-based statewide and local foundations, as well as public safety and community-based organizations in order to create and sustain positive, systemic, long-lasting change. We have had a great amount of support from our California colleagues in philanthropy, which we are grateful. And I have been blessed with the strong leadership and vision of the president of the Ford Foundation, Darren Walker. In a recent communication with our global staff, he said, and I quote, "Ultimately, the Ford Foundation is dedicated to solving problems, the largest, thorniest, most complicated problems of the day. To do so, we consistently seek out creative, pragmatic solutions and partnerships that give us the best chance to make a meaningful difference in the lives of people who are left behind in our society." As you might have read in last Friday's Sacramento Bee, he went on further to say, "The fact is, we know what works," just as Senator Leno said. "And now is the time to rally behind these proven solutions and bring them to scale. In this, we might begin to restore balance to the criminal justice system and dignity and equality for all those whose lives it touches." Thank you very much.
Good morning. My name is Robert Bozick, and I am a sociologist with the RAND Corporation. I have been studying the effectiveness of educational programs and policies for 15 years. RAND is a nonprofit research institution based in Santa Monica, California. I assume that many folks in this room are familiar with RAND and RAND's research, but in case you are not, I want you all to know that a hallmark of the work that RAND does is that we provide nonpartisan, objective research that uses the most rigorous scientific methods to inform policymakers and decision makers to help improve their organizations, to help improve the world around them. It is with that background that I'm here as an ambassador of RAND today to discuss findings from a study that we completed last year on the effectiveness of correctional education for the U.S. Department of Justice's Bureau of Justice Assistance. I don't think I need to explain to anyone in this room that spending taxpayer dollars on providing educational services to inmates is not always a politically popular stance. Particularly in the wake of the Great Recession, when there was a strong public sentiment to reduce federal spending on discretionary social programs, the U.S. Department of Justice's Bureau of Justice Assistance wanted to take a step back and think more critically about the programs that they were funding so that they could recalibrate their resources behind programs that they knew that worked. It is out of that sentiment and feeling that they awarded RAND Corporation a study to identify whether or not correctional education was one of those programs. Our study that we conducted for the U.S. Department of Justice is a meta-analysis. And what this means is that we did not go out and collect new data on correctional education, but instead we did a stock taking of the existing literature on correctional education over the past 31 years of research. Without getting too deep into the statistical weeds, meta-analyses takes advantage of existing studies and more or less aggregates them together and gives you a mean look at whether or not different programs or policies are working. We identified 267 empirical studies of correctional education that have been published between 1980 and 2011. So 31 years of research that we're able to call together. I want to point out that our study was specifically focused on educational interventions. So we are not looking at things like life skills or counseling programs or other types of rehabilitation programs in prison. We are specifically looking at educational interventions that have an academic or a vocational component that was provided to inmates while they were in prison. So this is programs that are not provided to parolees, but specifically within correctional institutions. They needed to be led by an instructor with a formal curriculum that led to a degree. The degree could be a GED, a high school diploma, an associate's degree, or a bachelor's degree. But those were the criteria that we used to select the interventions that we examined. Out of those 267 empirical studies, we reduced that number down to 58 that had an eligible research design, meaning that it had a treatment group of inmates who had participated in correctional education and a comparison group of inmates who did not participate in correctional education. And we looked across 3 sets of outcomes: learning, recidivism, and post-release employment. And so I want to echo something that Doug said, that why I think all of us care about correctional education, because we see it as a larger benefit that resonates across a number of different domains. The research literature is very narrow in terms of its focus, and so I'm only able to talk to you today about these particular outcomes. And in specific, I'm going to talk about recidivism and post-release employment, as I think they're most consequential to some of the issues that you all are grappling with respect to rolling out Senate Bill 1391. Of the 58 studies that we looked at, 50 of them used recidivism as an outcome. And when we aggregate across all of the treatment group and comparison groups, we found that inmates who received correctional education had a 36% lower odds of recidivating following the release from prison. 36% lower odds. So if you put that in a metric that might be a little more interpretable, this is roughly about a 13 percentage point difference in rates of recidivism between those who receive correctional education and those who do not receive correctional education. As many of you know, correctional education programs, like other social service programs, are oftentimes voluntary. So in some cases, it could be the case that more motivated, more forward-thinking inmates are taking advantage of correctional education. And so some of the outcomes that we observe in recidivism, it has been said, could potentially be a function of just different types of inmates who select into the programs. So to prevent that from tainting our results, we used benchmarks developed by the U.S. Department of Education to identify those specific studies that meet the highest level of scientific integrity. And when we look specifically just at those studies, out of all of the studies that we examine, our findings are still relatively robust, that correctional education benefits inmates who participate in the programs. I want to note specifically, since we're here to talk about Senate Bill 1391, that our study aggregated across different educational levels. So when I say correctional education, we are looking at GED programs, vocational programs, as well as post-secondary programs. One of the sub-analyses that we did was to disaggregate across the different types of education. And we found that the effect of correctional education holds across all types, but the effect is actually strongest when we look at post-secondary education. Post-secondary education cuts the odds of recidivating in half. To put this in a public spending perspective, we conducted a cost analysis using some of the data inputs from our meta-analysis. And I'm not going to get in the statistical weeds of exactly how we did this, but the key takeaway from this is that every dollar spent on correctional education results in $5 of savings in terms of recidivating costs. So not only do we find that correctional education is beneficial in improving individual behavior with respect to reducing recidivism, there is also a broader public benefit as well that comes back to taxpayers in the form of reductions in reincarceration costs. Lastly, I want to talk about our findings with respect to employment. Of the 58 studies that we looked at, 18 of them used employment, post-release employment. I want to be clear about that, post-release employment as an outcome. And I know many of us are interested in correctional education as a strategy for improving the lives of prisoners, because we believe that it imparts skills to them that they can take with them as they reintegrate into their community, and they can integrate back into the formal labor market. In our meta-analysis, we found that of those inmates who participated in correctional education, they had a 13% higher odds of finding a job following the release from prison. And so to put that in a different metric, that is basically about a 9 percentage point difference in employment rates between the treatment group and comparison group members. Unfortunately, unlike the large body of literature that we have on recidivism, very few studies met the high bar of scientific integrity that we applied to recidivism. However, even when we were able to focus in on that narrow body of studies that had a high bar of scientific integrity, the findings still held, and in fact, they were even stronger. So to wrap up here, I want to just review our findings one more time. Correctional education, as we found in our study, a strong effect on reducing recidivism. So leads to a 36% lower odds of recidivism among those who participate. This translates into a cost savings to taxpayers, and it also is a potentially effective strategy at improving the post-release employment prospects of recently released prisoners. We have a summary of our findings in your packet. Rand also has a more complete report that is available on our website, and I can provide it to folks who might be interested, that has more detailed information on the individual studies that we reviewed. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now we'll hone in on California and welcome Rebecca Silbert and Debbie Mukumal.
Thank you. Good morning. For the past year, Berkeley and Stanford have been working on the report that you have, the Degrees of Freedom report. Debbie and I are going to each take about 10 minutes to highlight some of the findings and recommendations from that report. The report is based on interviews with about 175 educators, correctional administrators, and formerly incarcerated students, both in California and from programs outside of California that we believed were strong models. Our conclusion is that California has the educational infrastructure to serve these students, but we are not doing it as well as we should be, and we're not doing it as well as we can be. I want to highlight first two benefits in addition to the benefits found in the RAND study and mentioned by Mr. Wood. The first is a benefit to the institution as a whole, to everyone in the institution. We heard repeatedly and saw repeatedly benefits within the institution for security, mitigation of racial divisions, incentivizing good behavior, encouraging everyone to earn a GED or a diploma so they could participate in college. College helps lifers become eligible for parole, decreases their public safety risk. Dave Long, who was the warden at Ironwood, is now at California City, spoke about the resistance of his staff when he began implementing college. Many of his staff do not themselves have an AA or bachelor's degree. And within a few years, it was a complete transformation. Their working environment was better, security increased, and there was no more resistance. That took leadership from the top, but it happened. We heard from Dale Hamad, who's a principal at Sac State Prison. She actually has many years in correctional education. She started at a community college teaching inside the prisons and is now working at CDCR. She spoke very emphatically about the value of the college courses for everyone. She saw her students going through the ABE, that's the basic education classes, and aiming for their GED or diploma so that they could take the college classes. It's also important not to forget about the families. We heard about inmates in prison studying next to their children, parents studying together, parents being role models for their children, children who see their parents struggle and persist through college classes and even better, a graduation. Those children are going to stay in school. The second other benefit I want to highlight is the benefit that college provides when people do leave. As Senator Hancock mentioned, 96% of everyone in our prisons is coming home sooner or later, 50,000 estimated in the next 2 years, and that's not counting Prop 47, with which I'm sure everyone in this room is aware. According to CDCR, about 14% of those that are coming out in the next 2 years have a verified GED or diploma. There will be many more than that whose prior education has not been verifiable by CDCR. Providing these college classes in custody builds critical skills beyond just the academic building, skills like persistence, skills like resilience, self-worth. It provides something on their resume. It gives them references. All of these things are vital when they come out. The best college programs that are in prisons today, most of these are outside of California, but it includes PUP in San Quentin. These students have a link to the outside. They have a connection to the outside. The students who are leaving prison may not finish on the inside, or they may want to continue. Once they get out, they're facing obstacles that not everyone else is facing. They face many additional challenges that even other educationally disadvantaged students don't face. Something as simple as showing up at the right office on the right day with the right forms and the right ID. Maybe being told to come back the next day and then coming back the next day, not giving up. Those things can be overcome with the right structural supports, with encouragement, with the links that are created on the inside. We heard it from, for example, Merritt College. We heard it from Santa Rosa College. We heard it from SF State. Repeated stories of students who, before they found those programs, had given up. On the outside, formerly incarcerated students do better when they have some sort of transition or on-ramp. So in our research, we really tried to figure out what was happening in California today, knowing the value of college. Let me paint just a very quick picture of our state, because it is a gigantic state, unlike some of the other pathways state. We have 112 community colleges serving 75% of our undergrads in the state, and almost a quarter of the community college students nationwide. But we have, and when connected to that, we have 33 public universities and colleges. We have existing on-ramps and support structures for transitions between them. We already have that. At the same time, we have 90% of the people in our jails are sitting 10 miles or less, 5 miles or closer to a community college. And 21 of our 35 prisons are within 20 miles of a community college. We were once leaders. In the 70s, we had in-prison college in every single prison, in-person classes. We had on-ramps and transition programs at 15 community colleges, half of the CSU campuses. It was all decimated in the early 1990s, in part because of the loss of Pell Grants, in part because of other loss of funding. But as of the mid-1990s, there was no option left but distance education. That began with one community college in '98, very quickly grew exponentially, and has still grown, is still growing. 1391 provides an opportunity to launch a new day for correctional education, but it does need to be done correctly. And for that, let me highlight two of our findings. California doesn't have sufficient college opportunities, and most of the opportunities that we're offering are not the quality that they should be and can be. Regarding sufficiency, as senators no doubt know, we spend more on prison than we do on higher education. In the 70s, we had 8.6% of our state prisoners in college. That number's dropped to half 4.4%. So while we're increasing dramatically our prison population, the number of students in college has dropped in half. The percentage of students in college, excuse me. We know that there are people in our prisons and our jails and our communities who are college ready. There are more people with verified diplomas and GEDs than there are people enrolled in college. There was a 2013 survey of the SCIU, the teachers within prisons, and they strongly advocated for more college and talked about the fact that their students were asking for more college. There's a program at Feather River. It has a waiting list of 1,000 people. These same waiting lists, by the way, apply on the outside. So programs on the outside, such as those that I mentioned at Merritt College and San Francisco State and Santa Rosa, they also have waiting lists. And yet, particularly in our prisons, California continues to rely on outdated and ineffective distance ed for the most part. There is one provider, which is Coastline, which is the largest provider. It's in all 35 prisons. It has video, non-interactive distance education based solely on the videos and written communication, no additional services, serving thousands of people. Within the confines of the pre-1391 world, some other programs were able to develop better programs. So it can be done. Feather River, for example. Feather River is a text-based program. It's correspondence. It had to be prior to 1391, but they build a cohort of students. They group them together into learning communities, and they give them a CSU transferable degree organized by Feather River with support. They have lending libraries to address the prohibitive cost of books, which falls generally on the inmates' families. They even have a graduation, and they provide the caps, the gowns, the diplomas. But they can serve only 500 students, and they have a waiting list of 1,000. Palo Verde, although it offers a text-based correspondence to about 1,000 people, also has an online pilot, serving currently only about 50 to 60, but that's an interactive online pilot, more interactive. They also offer correspondence, which at least they have supplemented with some EOPS funding. That's the Extended Opportunity Programs and Services. That allows counselors to go from Palo Verde out to the prisons they serve to have individual meetings or small group meetings to talk about educational planning, course selection, degree granting. Those are questions that students on the inside without those services, they can't do that without the counseling. They don't have the history often to know what kind of a degree do I need? What will these classes help me? Did I just waste a semester taking classes that actually don't count to my degree? Those kinds of things need interaction. Chaffey College has a remarkable program. With CIW, they take a 35-student, it's at the women's programs, they take a 35-student cohort and bring them all the way through to a degree. They model it completely on the campus. They take breaks when the campus takes breaks. They give the women t-shirts and tote bags. They have a room they decorate with Chaffey material. They tried to show live broadcasts of the events. There was a concert once. They had to tape delay it, but they've gotten great support from the warden. Again, support from the top was critical. And we have only one in-person college program, the PUP Projects in San Quentin, which serves 330 students, also not meeting the need. In contrast, New York has 21 in-person college programs in its 54 prisons. This means that we're serving only about 12% of our incarcerated college students with something other than low quality